Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and to all the students who are here this morning. Now, I'm hoping that the microphone, is that all right if I walk over here? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yep, good. All right, lovely. So I'm going to talk about optimism this morning in the context of character education. So behind me, obviously, is firstly the definition of optimism that I think was sent out in relation to this conference. Optimism is being hopefulness and confidence about the future or the success of something. And as John says, UK politics is proving a little troublesome in that process at the moment. So I'm going to think more broadly about being optimistic in the 21st century at the moment. But on the left of the slides is a picture, obviously, of a glass. Now, who thinks that glass is half full? Hands up. Okay, great. And who thinks, when they look at that, that's a glass that's half empty? Okay, there's a couple of hands, a couple of honest hands. That's great. That's absolutely. So, well, in that case, I think, given that you all think it's half full, I think my job is here is done in terms of your positive, optimistic outlook in life. Optimism comes from the word optimism comes from Latin word optimus, which means best. And that means looking for the best in any situation and expecting good things to happen. There is a saying, there's a great song, I think it's Spike Milligan, always look on the bright side of life. And if you want cheering up, just go and Google it and listen. And in itself, it's just a cheerful song. But I also put on because obviously we can never have a talk by a politician without having a quote from Winston Churchill. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. And just have a think about that, unpick that at your leisure when you get a chance. And of course, we all want to be the person who is going to see the glass half full and is going to see the opportunity in every difficulty. Now, when I'm talking about optimism, I'm talking about looking on the bright side of life. I'm not talking about telling people, and you will know, and one of my other great passions in life, one of the things I did in 2012 was to lead a big general debate on mental health in the House of Commons. And I suspect that perhaps at school or elsewhere, you've talked about mental health challenges, people perhaps suffering from things like depression, anxiety, or more serious disorders. I'm not talking about that this morning. There are times in life when actually people do suffer from very serious mental health challenges. And frankly, being told to look on the bright side, chin up and all the rest of it is not helpful. There will be times when people will need proper counselling, they might need to take medicine, they might need to obviously have a definite medical intervention. So that's not what I'm talking about this morning, although I do think actually that schools and other organisations that focus on character, on resilience and persistence, which I'm going to come on to talk about, and optimism and things like that, actually do help in terms of building greater mental resilience. But there will be times, as I say, when there is proper medical intervention that's needed. And frankly, as I say, being told to cheer up and look on the bright side is not helpful in those situations. But really for the rest of us, there will always be times, and I'm particularly directing this probably at the students, there's always going to be times in life when things aren't going to go according to plan. I'm sure you've probably faced some of those situations at the moment. Exams that haven't gone right, perhaps struggling to get into to this or to any other school, other events in life, things at home which actually have been pretty tough. And optimism and character is about the way that we respond to those challenges. Character education has been defined, basically, or character, as what do you do when no one else is looking in terms of your response to situations. I do think that positivity or a positive attitude and gratitude can absolutely be learned. So my book that I wrote was about character being taught and not caught. And basically that's saying, that let's not leave these things to chance. And I pay tribute to Townley and to other schools who have said we're actually going to talk about character and make it something that is very important, fundamental part of our school. I think optimism, gratitude, positivity can all be, as I say, articulated, they can be learned, and it's important. Schools are obviously very, very important. You spend an awful lot of your time, weeks and weeks of each year here at school. So of course the environment that you're in is very important, but so too of course is home, so too of course are the other things that you do in your life and the other people, your peers and other adults as role models that you will come across. Optimism obviously also has important positive health benefits, and there's all sorts of research saying that if you have a more optimistic outlook in life, that's good not just for mental health and mental resilience, but also for physical health. Actually, in terms of dealing, if you do have physical health challenges, optimism will help in that regard. Now, there's a professor of psychology, Martin Seligman, who has written a lot about positive education. And in terms of optimism, he says it's reacting to problems with a sense of confidence and high personal ability. Now, of course, we're not going to be optimistic all the time. There are going to be times when you're going to feel actually that lots of things are going on in your life. You can be overwhelmed by what's happening, and actually trying to retain a sunny, optimistic outlook is undoubtedly going to be a bit of a challenge. But actually, I think a lot about life is about standing back, and this is where character education comes in. This is why I'm so passionate about it. It's about choosing how, exactly as Martin Seligman has said, about how you react to situations. Are you able to stand back, to think about your next steps and taking control, or are other people going to be making decisions on your behalf? Now, I got interested in character education, as I say, and I was interested in mental health before I was Education Secretary. My background is I'm a lawyer by training, and I worked for 16 years in the City of London. And having trained myself, I then became responsible in the last firm I worked for training some of the younger trainee solicitors who came in from law school and turning them into solicitors. And it became very clear to me, both as a sort of a trainee, a trainer, but also as an employer, that actually the attitude that people had to working is really, really important. And things like interviews, that ability to for people to walk in to an interview room, to look the person they're meeting in the eye, to shake them by the hand, to perhaps have a conversation with them, is really important. And some people have that and some people don't. And why is it that some people have that ability and some people don't? Now, some people perhaps just innately know these things, but actually lots of people don't, and they have been taught it. They have been made to think about it, whether by parents or by teachers or by other people. And then when I became a Member of Parliament in 2010, being a Member of Parliament is a fantastic job. I hope that at least some of the students in the room will think about going into politics, because we certainly need more female Members of Parliament, and women make great Members of Parliament, because I think we're able to deal really well with lots of different people, and that's what you do as a Member of Parliament. You meet loads of different people all the time. And of course, the bit of politics that people see is a bit where you're standing in the House of Commons and talking and debating everything else. But there's a lot more to politics and being an MP than that. And part of it is what we do in our local constituencies. And that's about meeting, as I say, lots of different people, hearing about lots of different problems, trying to help people to serve, to unpick those problems, and to remain optimistic about the chances of finding a solution to those issues that people have brought to you. But it was really interesting to look at, again, how some people were dealing with some really terrible situations, but remaining optimistic or positive that they could be dealt with. And actually, it's lovely sometimes hearing stories about people who have had something really bad happen to them, and then I bump into them locally, and actually they are in a completely different place. They've got things back together, they've got a sense of purpose, and they're in the right place. And other people for whom that's a bit of a struggle. And again, why is that? Why is it that some people are able to deal with life's challenges in a completely different way from others? And I do think that character, including optimism, is a very important part of that. And character education is about saying that we want I think everybody in a school environment. I mean, of course, students and pupils are immensely important, but so too, obviously, our staff members are critical. And I mean by that all staff, not just those who are teaching. And this is about wanting people to flourish personally. And so when I decided that I was going to make character education a focus, and we set up the Character Awards, and it's great to hear people who have benefited from those, but we also set up obviously some funding to go with it. I started doing a lot of round tables. So Anthony Selden, who you're going to hear from a little bit later on, is brilliant on character and on mental health and resilience and everything else. But one of the other organisations I came across was called the Jubilee Centre for Virtues. So when we talk about character, what do we actually mean? Well, as I say, I had this book published in September of last year. And character is defined as the distinguishing qualities of a person's moral qualities and moral strength. You could also talk about values, which make up a person's character. And Neil Hawkes, who's the founder of the Values-Based Education Trust, talks about a value as a principle that guides our thinking and behaviour, and says that values help to determine the formation of our character. And as I say, the Jubilee Centre from Birmingham, and they've set up a school called the University of Birmingham School, where they are explicitly teaching character as part of the curriculum. And they identify 4 types of virtues: civic, moral, performance, and intellectual. And civic virtues, and I suspect that you'll probably recognise all of these. Civic are things like obviously service and volunteering, citizenship, community awareness, and spirit. Moral virtues are things like courage, compassion, gratitude, which I'll come back to, honesty and integrity, humility, modesty, self-discipline. Performance virtues are things like resilience, perseverance, grit, determination, leadership, and teamwork. And I think leadership and what you're doing in GSL is really, really important. And boy, are we going to need good leaders for the future. And then we have intellectual virtues, things like reflection, critical thinking, curiosity, communication, resourcefulness, and open-mindedness. Now, optimism isn't actually in that list. And the point that I made when I was doing character education was there is no one right set of virtues or values. It wouldn't be right for the Department for Education or anybody else to say these are the values that we want all young people in the English education system to develop. Because it's absolutely right that it's your school, your governors, your community, your parents, your staff, and the pupils who think about the virtues and values that we want all of us to develop to help towards that aim of personal flourishing. And all this is not new. I mention here Aristotle in the book, and a lot of this, particularly a lot of the Jubilee Centre work, very much comes from Aristotle, who wanted he believed that humans possessed a natural moral end, a good flourishing life, a state of being an excellent human. And I think that optimism is very much a part of wanting all of that. I think the important thing about optimism is that it helps people to bounce back and to persevere, and those are really useful skills to have in life. But the other 3 things I learned in writing the book were the selves. Self-reflection, which means actually standing back from a situation and thinking, well, how did I react to that? What did I learn from the situation? So those of you, for example, who are going away in a few weeks' time, actually afterwards thinking, what have I learnt from that? What would I like to have done more of? What were the bits that didn't work for me? What are the bits that actually I know that I'm going to have to work on perhaps? Self-control, and that's really important about being responsible for our own reactions to situations. And I think as you get older, obviously that's more important. When we're very young, we all know, particularly if you're parents or you've been parents of very small children, they often have no self-control whatsoever, and you're the one telling them all the time to calm down and stop overreacting and everything else. Hopefully as we get older, we're able to take control of our situation. And actually, I do think that optimism is about choosing response to a situation and not blaming yourself. So actually, the difference between an optimist and a pessimist, as in the Winston Churchill quote, is very much about, as I say, responding to situations. When something bad happens, do you see the opportunity? Or do you see actually just this is a terrible situation, I blame myself, and I'm so stupid for making or allowing this to happen? And the other self is self-awareness. I think being aware of ourselves, how we come across, our relations with other people. Now in the book I talk about schools of character being like sticks of rock. Wherever you cut through the school, you find character going on. And my argument in the book is that actually we shouldn't leave character to chance. We shouldn't allow it just to be caught. Maybe there's the right environment that we're all in, which has got good values and is talking about good virtues, or maybe not. And some people will pick up good values from that, and other people will go blindly along and not realise there are any values within the organisation at all. So what were the common traits that I found in different schools? And I visited schools right the way across the country, mainly those who had won character awards, although actually since writing the book I've visited lots of other schools as well. And I think it was really interesting, we were saying before that I think a lot of schools already did a lot of this, but they didn't necessarily badge it under the word character. And there is actually a debate to be had about whether character is the right word, but I think until somebody else comes up with something better, that's the one I'm going to carry on using. So what were the common traits in the schools? Well, the first thing was that they identified the traits or the values or the virtues that they wanted their young people to develop. And in fact, those values and virtues they wanted to be running right the way throughout the school. So, for example, one of the schools that I went to visit, primary school in North London, one of the things was they said by the end of year 6, they had a whole list of things, it's in the book, they wanted their young people to develop, but one of them was a positive attitude. And I think that's very much linked to the optimism that we're going to be hearing about today. The schools they were explicit about wanting their students to develop good character, and they used character language all the time. So one of the projects I went to wasn't necessarily a school, it was working with school pupils in East London, working with young boys who are finding, I think, particularly maths a real challenge, and they used some maths work after school, but they also used football. So they allowed people, rightly to go off and run around, and then they would come back, and they would also then, but in the lesson, when people were trying to work through, when the students were trying to work through problems they were finding difficult at school, for example, they used the language of characters, they used the language of perseverance, about being optimistic and having self-belief in being able to solve these challenges. The schools adopt a whole school approach, and as I say, that means it covers absolutely everybody. And I think it's really important as adults in any organisation that we work in, that we do think about how we are instilling good values and virtues for all employees, not just in the case of schools. It's not just, obviously, pupils and students are very important, but it's about everybody who works in that environment. But it's also about the fact that as adults, we are role models, and particularly teachers are obviously very influential in terms of the way that pupils develop and what they see every day. I've talked about self-reflection, that encouragement of self-reflection, self-assessment, thinking about the things that you have learned and the skills and qualities and virtues that you want to continue to develop. Many of the schools reward virtues, so they reward character work, and they will say you've shown great perseverance in this particular lesson, and they will have a specific reward scheme for that, but it isn't formally assessed. I don't think that you can assess character. I don't think you can assess how optimistic somebody is. Yes, you've got 9 out of 10 for optimism today. It would be lovely, perhaps, but I don't think that's realistic, nor do I think I don't think it's appropriate to do that. But I do think talking about it and rewarding it is important. And the other thing is extracurricular. I suspect that all of you are involved in one way or another in activities either outside your lessons but in school, or in things that are completely unrelated to school. And those extracurricular activities are really, really important in terms of developing other skills and virtues and values and everything else. And finally, let me just finish with this. I think the world of work. Look, for most of us, unless you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, we're all going to have to leave our education and go and find a job, start a career, plan what it is that we want to do with the rest of our lives. I would also say that just because you make decisions at the age of 16 or 18, that doesn't mean things are set in stone forevermore. And again, going back to where we started about optimism, actually it's knowing that you are in control of your own circumstances, and that as life changes, as you change, actually you're able to change the circumstances around you. But it's undoubtedly true that these days employers, whilst they want good knowledge, they do want things like maths and English, numeracy and literacy are really, really important. The skills and attributes that young people have, particularly they talk about resilience, enthusiasm and creativity. I think curiosity is also another one. But the other thing that's also very important, I think, for employers is knowing that the person in front of them is able to take feedback and criticism and respond appropriately. And again, that goes all the way back to optimism, doesn't it? Because actually, if you get some feedback, if you're a pessimist, you will start to perhaps blame yourself and you'll say, I can't believe I've handled that so badly. I can't believe that somebody's given me such feedback on my work. But an optimist will see the opportunity in that feedback and say, actually, on reflection, I think that's fair, or maybe it's not fair. You know what? I'm going to do it better next time so that person is not justified in giving me that feedback in the future. So just to conclude, because I know we've got other presentations and other exciting people to listen from this morning, but I think that actually character, as I say, should run through every organisation. We do need to be much more explicit about the values and the virtues that we all practice, that we talk about, that we want to demonstrate to others in terms of our personal flourishing. I think schools are absolutely vital in all of this, and the whole school community. And finally, I think being grateful, showing optimism, having a positive attitude actually means that you've taken control of your situation and your circumstances, and then you're actually able to be in control of the way that you react to events, not allow other people and other events to dictate your response in life. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning.